Well, welcome, Tim. It's good to see you.
Hey,
So, we'd love for you to share a little bit with us today about what you do at Mylio, and then dig into, like Rich said, face tagging,
mhm.
and show us the ins and outs.
I'm one of our testers. I work primarily on automation. We do it. Mylio has a huge surface area, so in order to keep people's photos safe and make sure everything is good before we ship it, we have a lot of automated tests to help us out. So we're not just clicking buttons. We also have machines that click buttons for us, and so I help maintain that with all the other testers as well as do other testing. I do a lot of evaluation of the UI and make sure that it's usable for customers and that the design works out. So just general testing of everything. Specifically, I tend to work on maps, face tagging, metadata.
Awesome. Well, if you want to go ahead and share your screen, we can jump into take a look at some face tagging, and you can show us how this works.
All right, can you see my screen?
I can.
Okay. So face tagging, there's several ways to tag faces. By far, the fastest is the batch tagging. Um, Mylio, as soon as you import your photos, Mylio starts doing face tagging in the background. And of course, we don't send all your pictures off to some server somewhere to process. It all happens on your machines. So the fastest way to do face tagging is to have as many of your machines online as possible. And they'll all get together. They'll start sharing the workload to process your faces and your pictures on your own machines. We find that desktops tend to give better face detection results than mobile devices, typically. So your desktop devices, your laptops are typically good devices to have online. We do face detection on mobile devices, but it's typically lower quality. And then what we'll do is we'll come back and we'll say, this is a lower quality face detection. So we'll reprocess those later on higher quality devices. So if you do face tagging on your, say, your Android phone, later on your desktop will come on and verify those faces and upgrade them. And this also, OCR is also done at the same time as face tagging. And we do that if you really want to get the best out of optical character recognition, OCR, it's good to have your desktops online, and especially a Mac. Macs are much better, we found, in general, on optical character recognition.
Interesting.
So I'll go ahead and go into batch tagging. Batch tagging works, it's scoped to whatever view you're in. So if you go into all photos view and you turn on batch tagging, it will do batch tagging on all of your photos. If you want to do just tagging on a specific folder, you can go to a specific folder and turn batch tagging on, and it will just do batch tagging in that particular folder. And it also works, this is the new feature we've added in this release, is we also do it within people view. So you can just go through the faces which are proposed to a particular person and look at batches that way. So what a batch is, we also call it a, sorry. So what a batch is it's a group of faces which look similar. So this are all pictures of a very young looking person, but this person gets older. And as they get older, as they grow a beard, as they wear sunglasses, as the lighting changes, their face will change slightly. And so these batches, or clusters, we also call them, we group them together. We say these faces all look similar. And I'll go in here. So here we have a list of different batches on the sidebar, which they could be the same person, but to Mylio, to face detection, they look differently. When we recognize a person, we say this one looks like Colleen. You can come in here, you can very quickly just approve it, just scan the faces that are here and click approve. You can reject the whole group. You can ignore the whole group. Ignore is typically for people you don't care about. Sometimes we'll find objects and you can ignore those. You can skip along to the next batch if you want to, if you don't want to tag that person at this particular time. You can also do that individually for photos. So if you want to say, oh, this isn't Colleen, this is somebody else, you can go ahead and tag that person right there and do it just for that individual photo. And it also works for batches. So we can grab a couple of photos and say these photos are this other person. And just those particular selected photos get tagged with that person. Once you've gone through a particular batch, you
But
can also go
I
into.
just want to point out, since that's actually my daughter, Mylio did correctly identify her. Those all were her. So you're showing other ways, but the app nailed it. Those were all pictures of my kid.
Yeah, one of the enduring features of being on test is your utter willingness to break rules and laws and whatever you're supposed to do and go completely off the rails. It's what we do to make sure everything works.
Well, you've got to come up with all of the cases that, you think somebody might throw at it, because the way one of us thinks through a particular process is not the way that everybody else thinks through it.
Yep.
And there's always going to be that one person that can come into a piece of software and break it because they do things completely differently and we didn't anticipate that scenario. So that's your job, is to anticipate as many of those scenarios as possible.
Yeah, Mylio manages over 1 billion photos on different people's computers. People have Macs, they have Androids, they have iPads, they have all kinds of NASs. They have all these different file formats. I mean, there's hundreds of different file formats for raw formats, for JPEGs, PNGs, videos. So going through all of those, and everyone has a different work process. Some people, use Mylio for face tagging. Some people use it for organizing their photos. Some people use it for backing up their photos. So everyone has slightly different ways of doing things. So all of that needs to be tested. So we go down all those routes, and so it's being creatively destructive is a test team attribute.
Actually sounds kind of fun.
So it can be. So these are all clusters which we recognize that this is the same person, but we can't recognize it with a person who is in your library. You can enter in the name there of the person that you want it to be, and you can create a name. All these are new names I'm creating, so it brings up our create new person dialog. You can even go into preview and you can look at a photo if it has multiple people. You can turn on the face tagging UI and you can individually do it. This is the older way, which you can still do, is you can tag people within a picture, just one face at a time. And in this case, we have these number keys on the side. So if you see a person and you say, oh yes, that is Mark, I'm going to push the number 4 key and Mark will automatically be tagged. That's a pretty quick way of doing it. There's Rich. And there are some other people who will quickly tag, and then auto advance takes us to the next picture. So this is a relatively fast way to go through a large set of pictures where a lot of people have already been tagged in your library, and you have good suggestions for them.
Nice.
All right, and then we can go back out to the batch tagging mode.
Now, one thing I like about this view is if you need to, you can jump between seeing, we switched to a different page there. Okay, there we go. If you go up to the More menu in the upper right corner, and you want to see what the full picture is, right now it's zoomed in on the individual faces, but if you're like wanting a little bit of context to go, okay, I think I know who that person is, but I want to see who's around them or what's around them, you can turn off zoom to face and it'll show the whole photo. And you get a little bit different view and a little bit more context. So there's been some old photos I've gone through that I'm like, gosh, who is that person? I know who that is. And then I look at it in the context of who was around them or what was around them. And it makes a little bit more sense and a little easier to tag. So that little zoom to face toggle is very helpful.
So there are also other ways to identify faces besides the face detection. Talk about those briefly. Those are relatively minor, but they are there. I might have a couple of pictures here, and I want to put a person in it, and maybe this picture doesn't have a face in it, or the face isn't recognized. You can, in the info panel, you also can add other people, and you can just tag the photo itself, and this doesn't come up. This doesn't come up as a face, but you can put that, tag the image with that person, and then we show that in people view.
I just learned something new. I didn't know you could do that. That's awesome.
And you can do that with videos also. So if you want to take a video with people, we don't run face recognition on videos because a video is basically, it's a couple thousand images. So we don't particularly run on those videos and do face detection there. But you can tag videos this way also.
Very cool. Well,
Yeah,
somebody had asked earlier about tagging pets. That's another good way to tag pets instead of having to go and do the long click on a pet's face and then add it in that way. You can manually add it in the info panel. That's great.
Yeah, I think Rich covered this briefly earlier. If you long press or you tap on it, you can. No, goodness gracious! It's a bug. I filed it.
It works. It's a little tricky.
If you long
Sometimes
press, if you ever get that bug, just zoom in and out on the picture. It's caused by a zoom issue. We reported that. That's on the list to get fixed. You can long press and click. You can long press and it will show the manual tagging UI for just a non-face. This also does not show up as a face exactly the way other faces. We won't recognize it and do face detection on it, but it will show up otherwise as a face in the UI.
Exactly.
And I want to throw out something before we transition to our next guest. I have this unfortunately large collection of pictures of my family wearing face masks for the last 2 years. Once I started tagging those pictures appropriately, the AI learned those people and added it to their algorithm. So now Mylio is correctly identifying my family with and without face masks. So the more people you tag, the more accurate it's going to get. So like with my kids, there's like baby pictures, then there's toddler pictures, then there's teenager pictures, and then there's adult pictures, but it's pretty accurate. And so I found that once I tagged it a couple of times, I tagged my own baby photos, just a couple of them, and a couple of like teenage years ones. It's finding all these scanned pictures of me and correctly identifying. So it doesn't take a lot of tags to get it accurate.
Yeah, it really is amazing. I mean, when I first started using Mylio, I had a couple of scanned pictures of my grandmother and then a couple more recent ones. And what blew me away is it recognized her as a teenager. I pulled up that batch detection, and in that batch that it was showing me, it was like, hey, is this the same person? And it was my grandma at probably 20 and then my grandma in her 80s. I thought that was mind-boggling.
Excellent.
If I can grab a couple more seconds, Angela, before we move on.
Of course.
One thing you can do if you select multiple people containers, you can also combine those people. So if one organizational trick you can do is you can create more people than necessary and you can combine them later. So if
I found that happened when I imported pictures from Facebook. People I had tagged in the photos in Facebook, sometimes those tags came in with the pictures. And so you could have tags that come in, or if you imported a library from Aperture, you might end up with it. So like my dad appeared in my library as Richard M. Harrington Sr. and Richard Harrington Sr. And I just merged those two together later on.
Yeah, I had the same issue when I brought in images that I'd done face tagging on in Lightroom. Some of those had tags and I ended up with, my Aunt Chris and Christine. So could merge those together.
Excellent. Tim, anything else you want to throw in before we bring in our next guest?
Just really quick, if you go into the settings, if you go into advanced, right at the top of the advanced settings menu are all the options for tweaking how face detection is done. So if you want to tweak it and change how reliable and accurate those face proposals are, you can adjust that accuracy here. You can change whether it turns on the battery or not if you're on a battery device. So there's lots of little tweaks you can do here.
Awesome.
That's excellent. Tim, thank you so much for taking time out from test, and thank you as well. I know that you guys worked really hard for this release and found and killed a ton of bugs because we want to ship quality software. So thank you for doing all of that. And we'll let you get back to the deadlines and bring in our next guest. But this is wonderful to see such a great deep dive on these tools. So thank you for that.
Yes, thank you so much.